Welcome to the Brave Feminine Leadership podcast. I'm your host, Melissa Hamilton, and I get to dig into delicious conversations with global leaders. And we get to soak up their wisdom and perspective on all things life and leadership. And I could not be more thrilled today to be joined by Tamaira Sandifer. Tamaira, welcome. Wonderful to have you here.
Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me. I'm so excited. I'm like excited, nervous, excited, and I don't know what to do with it.
Good. They're amazing feelings. So let's roll with it. Let me share with our audience, if they haven't come across you before, let me briefly touch on your bio, and then I can't wait to get going into your story. So Tamaira Miss Tee Sandifer is the founder of the award-winning nonprofit studio Tee Arts and Entertainment, is a Forbes 50 culture champion who's implemented arts and dance programs in over 600 schools globally and impacted over 800,000 students. Miss T, as she's affectionately known, has created massive and proven success in bettering the economic and emotional lives of youth. Miss T's developed some of Hollywood's most sought-after young dancers, including the 2016 winner of So You Think You Can Dance, Keita the Great, and her graduates currently travel the world performing with stars such as Justin Bieber, Jennifer Lopez, Selena Gomez, Rihanna, Drake, Beyonce. And I know, Miss T, we could keep going because there's so many more. Once again, welcome. For people who have not come across you before, would you start by just telling us, who are you as a human being?
Oh, that's a great question. I'm a servant. I consider myself a public servant. So any way that I could show up in the world in a servant leader capacity, that's who I am to the core. I'm also a mom, and I'm a mom to, children that I was gifted to be able to create, but also to kids that need a mom like one, and sometimes a father like one. I work with a lot of different people, that are in single parent households, and there's lots of kids around me all the time. I'm a loyal friend, and I'm definitely somebody that you want to have on your team just because I like to play to win. And I would also offer that I love entrepreneurship. I think that there's a way for everybody to be successful financially. I think that we live in a world and a time where everyone can have more than enough. And so whenever I get to show up as the entrepreneur in somebody's life, that's always really exciting to me. And I'm a daughter, and got lots of sisters. And so me, the person, I'm just really that shy girl that just wants everybody to be happy.
Oh, what a gorgeous description. So let me ask you then, how did you end up teaching all of these incredible arts and dance programs? Like, what's the story? What drives you? Tell us about this.
Well, I can remember as far back as being 7 years old. We grew up in the height of the crack epidemic here in the States, and we were losing our parents in the community I grew up in. I grew up very poor, and I don't say that because I feel sad about it. I say that because it equipped me in a way that helps me help people. But most often we were parents to our parents. And so one of the things that kept me in my, there were 6 of us kids in my family. My mom was a single mom. She was gone a lot. And we didn't have cell phones, so we never knew when she was coming home. And so one of the things that kind of, I did to keep us happy and occupied and off the streets, because if you were playing outside in the streets, there's a multitude of not so great things that could happen to you because of the gang wars and drug wars and things like that. So, from as early as I can remember, I always taught my brothers and sisters how to dance. I didn't talk much, but I did make them line up and dance. And so I would watch shows like Fame, with Miss Allen, my dance hero, and I got to meet her for the first time a short while ago to thank her. But I would watch her and model everything that she did, and that's the thread of arts that has just followed me my entire life. When I, was relocating to different places, the one constant in my universe was I could teach somebody to dance. And so that's, the beginnings is I did it to keep my siblings safe and happy. And the kids in the neighborhood, like we didn't have a lot, and people weren't coming to build programs there because we didn't have the money to pay for them. So that's the something I could do. And so I've always done it, volunteered, and wherever I could serve. So churches, community centers, urban housing developments, parks. It just, if there were kids gathering, I wanted to be with them and help them. And that's how I enjoyed using my time.
Was there a moment? I mean, it sounds like you've always done it, so you don't know any different. You've always gathered these big groups
Yeah.
together and taught them to dance. But was there a moment where, it became really obvious to you that
Yeah.
this was actually what you were going to do, like
Yeah.
no other choice? Tell us about that.
Yes. So I remember relocating from the Bay Area to Northern California, Sacramento, and realizing that I had moved to a very conservative town. And a lot of us Bay Area people were navigating in this direction because the cost of living was so significantly lower. And so I remember getting here, and at the time, I had two little girls, and I didn't want them to lose the culture of who we were. I'm African American, my kids are African American, and there's certain things that we just do culturally, hip hop and, rap and music, and that's just a fabric of who we are. But I couldn't find anything like that here. And so I started volunteering again locally, and I found myself, at a park with my daughter, and she invited a couple of her friends, and I just had a boom box, and I was going through a rough patch in my life. I was going through a very hard time. So I didn't have a ton of money, but I had a little money in my pocket. And I just started teaching them at the park. And, one week it was four kids, two girls, two boys. And then the next week there was 11. And then the next 3 weeks there was 20, and then so on, so on. And so I ended up at the park with about 70 kids, and they were dancing and learning and competing, and we're doing all of this outside and learning on, they're on concrete. And I thought to myself one day, it was hot. It was so hot one day. I said, I realized I was onto something then because they just kept showing up. And I said, I better take this seriously to do the right thing by these kids whose parents were putting themselves in position for me to teach their kids. And so I took an early retirement from my job, which I was at the phone company. I cashed in my 401k, and I took out all my savings, and I took out a second on my house. And I took all of that, and I bought a building, and I started Studio Tee. And it's been a wild peak and valley adventure ever since. But a lot of those kids that I started out with in the park, they're now parents, and I'm teaching their kids. So it's been a very rewarding experience. But I would say that's the start of the expression of me through Studio Tee as a business.
And it's much more than arts and dance programs that you're teaching, right?
Oh my goodness. Yeah. 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 So we're super responsive. So it started with the hip hop because that's what the kids were, that's what they love. And it was started during a time where it was just starting to take off. So we really were we were ahead of the curve in that respect with what we were teaching. And so, I noticed that we would get kids showing up, and they would give me their best, but they would leave hungry. And so I challenged myself. I couldn't set the expectation that they give me excellence on an empty stomach. So I started providing, take home things that they can go home, and not something where they had to get like in a welfare line, because then shame will attach itself to that and they won't do it. And so just something where you need it, baby, it's there, you take it. And that's something that's always worked for us. Another thing is when the season shifts, it was great when we were outside, the weather was, conducive for us to be able to do this kind of stuff outside. But when the season would shift and it is cold, and then you have the kids that are showing up still in summer clothes and tank tops because they don't have the money for proper, clothes for the climate shift. I realized I had to do something that meets the basic needs of our kids. So we added programs for emergency food, emergency clothes, hygiene items was a big deal as my young people transitioned from, preteen, teen. That's a big thing. And that's enough to get you bullied and beat up if you smell bad.
Yeah.
And so that was a thing in a lot of our lower income communities. So providing those services. And then I realized, especially when my kids started to break into Hollywood, they were making great money, but they weren't saving it. They weren't budgeting it. They were spending it as quickly as they got it. And so I started having to teach things like fiscal well-being, and not just for my kids, but also my parents. Again, you're dealing with single parent households. Their question always is, how do I make this little bit that I get stretch? And so anything from, grocery shopping on a budget, couponing, when extreme couponing was a big deal, coupon clipping, and then they had a meal prep. A lot of times our parents were spending so much money driving through fast food because, again, single mom, not a lot of time. It's convenient, but they didn't know how much it was costing them. And then I had families that were getting into debt. I had gotten into over $600,000 worth of debt, losing my building and my, all my investment when I started the company, and then we had a huge recession. So I lost everything. And so it took me 3 years, just a real grit work to get out from under that debt. And so I just document all my practices, and I teach my parents how to get out of debt, how not to get in debt with my young people, how to save. And then, some of the creative stuff started to evolve as separate entities in the company, like media arts, videography, photography, graphic design, social media content development. All of those things became critical components because our kids became brands when they started doing, entertainment work, and how to market themselves as a brand, how to contract themselves as a brand, and then how to do like things like video auditions. A lot of times we're dealing with kids that don't have the money to get on a plane and go back and forth to LA or New York to audition for a gig. And so we figured out how to capitalize on video and YouTube when YouTube just came out. And so just continuing those practices and evolving them, again, positioned us ahead of the curve for what everybody went through during COVID. We already had programs and systems established using these things that made us, cultural experts when the whole world shut down. And so we added things like consulting. We ended up consulting a lot of other businesses so they didn't go under, and then using our youth that we've groomed in media arts to help small businesses stay open virtually. And so again, we're agile in a way that we can be very responsive when the times shift or when a need presents itself. And I just pay very close attention. Again, I'm comfortable behind the scenes, but I learn by watching and listening. And so a lot of the programs we have are just responsive programs to what we experience with our young people as they're talking, saying, I'm hungry.
Yeah. How did you provide for that? I mean, is that through partnerships and things like that? I mean, how did you, because there's so many different things that you're providing and supporting, clothing and food and all sorts of things. How did that work?
I ask.
Yeah.
I ask anybody and everybody. And that's, again, you grow up poor. So the worst somebody can say to you is no.
Mm.
And to me, no is never no. No is not you. I got to ask the person, somebody else. It's just not you, but it's not ever no. It's just not you. Like, who else can I talk to that's here? And so I'll ask anybody for anything if it means my kids get a shot at a legitimately good life. I don't have a problem knocking on doors, or I learned how to, write grants, and that's been helpful. My city's been very, very good to me. The cities that we go to, just because they recognize the need, they also recognize that they can't do the level of problem solving that we can do as boots on the ground. So I'm just intentional about doing quality work, and, the resources seem to find us. But again, I'll knock on any door to get what we need in order for our kids to have a healthy, safe life and lifestyle.
How did you find the resilience to, ending up in a situation with so much debt and losing the building and all those sorts of things? How did you find the kind of grit and resilience to come back from that? I mean, I guess you had options to do a whole range of things at that point.
No, I didn't have any options. I think that when you know that you don't have a choice, when you know that you are in a leadership position and your example and how you live your life dictates sometimes how other people live their lives. Like, I don't, and I teach this to my staff. I'm like, none of this is optional. I know what I signed up for. I mean, if I'm telling you I want you to live a debt-free, stress-free life, then I have to model that for you. If I'm telling my kids I don't want you to grow up the way I grew up, then that means I have to change something about how I'm living life. And so it's always been very, very clear to me that, again, I'm a servant leader, but that leader stuff is the blaring part of it. Most people don't follow, excuse me, what you say. They follow what you do. And the last thing I want for these thousands of kids that are watching me is for them to feel the pressure of the decision making that costs you everything. Like, I think it's okay for them to have some hard moments, but I don't think that, the bottom falling out of life and teetering between sanity and insanity. I don't want that for anybody. So that's motivation always for me to grow, to change, to shift, to, okay, T, you're not getting your nails done and don't even think about Starbucks. Every nickel goes towards debt until the debt's done. And I think that's the kind of mindset that if you're wanting to be a leader, and anybody that goes into business, that's automatically how you're classified, then those sorts of things have to be considered. Not what you want people to hear you say, what do you want them to see you do that you want them to repeat? And I always have kids around me. So, I don't want the next 2 or 3 generations to wrestle with the same thing that I wrestled with. And I tell my young people all the time, man, get some better problems, get bigger, better problems than me. Like, Miss T, what do we do with the $10,000 we just got? Like, get some of those problems, but not like we don't have enough for food or light bills. Like, I had those problems. You don't need those problems. I already tackled those.
So this is a mission.
Yeah.
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 There's no
I mean,
option.
No, I know why I'm here. I know what I signed up for. I know what my assignment is. And I think that's a unique, special thing. Most people, they don't discover in a lifetime why they were created. I'm very clear about that. And so again, like, how do you say, well, no, I don't feel like being who I'm supposed to be today? Like, that's weird. Like, I don't do, my mind doesn't ever go there. So, people say, wow, you work a lot or you do a lot. I'm like, no, I'm being myself.
Yeah. This is
I'm
what
just
I
being me. Yeah, it's not I didn't clock into anything.
Yeah.
Like, Studio T is an expression of me. So I'm just showing up every day and lending to my gift to the world, which is me in business form.
Wow. So, I have so many questions, and more keep coming up, but I want to ask your opinion because we've been in that leadership space, and that, you've spoken so eloquently about it, but are leaders born or made from your perspective with all of the hundreds of thousands of people that you've helped?
I would say they're made. And I think that you have leadership attributes. I think we all do. As human beings, I think we all have leadership attributes. But I think situations and circumstances cause us to lean into the gift of leadership as the situation requires. And some people do that in the form of parenting. Some people do that in the form of pet ownership. And some people do that in the form of entrepreneurship. And then there are some that show up in life and do, take quantum leaps so that it creates a ripple effect through time. And so, when you say, are they born or made? I think they're made. And I think they're made in response to, what they're living in on a daily basis, or what they allow themselves to give their attention to. So you take a Steve Jobs, you take a Bill Gates, you take a Walt Disney. Walt Disney grew up, he did not have a childhood. And so he wanted everybody to feel the joy and happiness of a childlikeness moment or experience or season. And so he had that trauma challenge for himself that had made him show up as a leader. And I think it was the situations that he experienced growing up, like myself, that gifted him with the tenacity and the bravery and the courage and the confidence to just keep doing something that was never done. And how many people do you know that's in Disneyland? You say the word and everybody all over the world, no matter what part of the world, and Walt Disney, Disney World. But again, I think his situations, his trauma created the leader. And I think that, that's my same perspective for myself. Like, if you leave me alone, you'll find me, in a someplace reading a book by myself and just quiet and, shy bug. But there's something to be said about not wanting people to experience the hurt, the pain, the trauma that you experience, knowing that if you just allow yourself to be brave and step out, that you could transform someone's life, or maybe even the potential outcomes, so that they don't endure what you've been forced to endure. And that's always a thing, for me as a leader. So I think those things groom you. And the problem solving piece, I think that grooms our leaders of tomorrow. And if you think about the greats, they really set out to fix what was wrong. And I think that's what we're here for. This is a big puzzle that we all get together and solve together.
How do you measure success? What does the word mean to you?
When my kids are winning, I have kids that statistically they shouldn't be alive, but they're here and they're breathing and they're sane. I have kids that never should have graduated high school and they have college degrees. I have kids that, showed up in life so angry because of what they've been through. And now they're fantastic parents and they defy the odds. They beat the odds. So to me, success to me is when they're winning, when they win, when they get a legitimate shot at a good life and they take it and they win with it. Some people think it's all the accolades and the decorations. And I think that stuff is nice, that people notice what I'm doing. But really, success to me is when my babies are making it. And there's a lot of them that, we have to fight for that. And so
I heard you speak recently and you said something that I know will resonate with the Brave Feminine Leadership audience. And it was talking about, and you alluded to a little bit then, that if you leave you alone, you'll be curled up in the corner reading a book. And I heard you describe yourself as a really good behind the scenes. And I can imagine that you are sleeves rolled up in everything,
That's it.
Yeah. I can see all of that. And yet what you were talking about was, a choice, and maybe my words are wrong, because maybe again, there was no option for you to have to show up, for you to have to be more visible and kind of put yourself out there. And you talked about how incredibly uncomfortable that was. Tell us about that, because that whole visibility piece is such a challenge. So many of our audience are put your head down and work hard and that'll get you where you need to go, but it won't.
Nope, it won't. You got to show up. You got to be brave and be visible. And I've had a life where I had unwanted invisibility. Like I went unnoticed by, my parents. I went unnoticed by educators and leaders that should have noticed the gifts and the talents in this little girl and helped her to foster them. But so I could say I suffered unwanted invisibility for a long time, and you just grow accustomed to that and you grow okay with that, no matter how remarkable you are. And so, I learned maybe 4, almost 5 years ago that, people die with untapped potential. And they have so many capabilities, so much buried gifts and talents, but they never put themselves in position to make a demand on those things so that they can see how remarkable they are. And I told myself I didn't want to die without exhausting every potential that I have in me. And what that required for me was visibility to the public. And I'm very good with pushing my babies out, on stage and saying, okay, now go for it, fly, little birdie. But what they weren't seeing was me do the same thing. And so I had to, number one, face my fear of rejection. And that was a big thing because I experienced so much of it with starting something that I got told if I had $1 for every time that I got told that I would fail or you're not going to make it. And nobody wants that as a product. You're not going to have customers. I overheard someone at my grand opening at my first building. Well, they're standing in line with their back to me to greet me, and they have a plant in their hand, and they're talking to the person that's behind them. And they said, yeah, she'll never make it a year.
Oh, gosh.
And I'm literally right here. And so, I had to fight myself with crying, but just people telling me that I wouldn't fail because they couldn't they didn't have the capacity to see the vision that I could see.
Mm.
And so because they couldn't see it, it automatically meant that I was going to fail. So the rejection piece was a big piece. But you land on a Forbes list and you start getting all these decorations, there becomes an expectation that you have to be visible. Or people just want to ask you questions like, how on earth did you do this?
Yeah.
So last year for sure, I would say, was really 2020 was a breakthrough year for us. And I know a lot of people it wasn't, but it was a phenomenal year for my company. And it really showed me what we were made of. And a lot of people depended on it. But with that came the visibility. And so I've always, done advocacy work, in civic leadership, going to the Capitol and, fighting for my young people, laws to change and things
For
like that.
others. For others.
Yeah, I've always done that. But, this time I had to show up. My packaging had to change. So I had to dress a certain way because, my kids are not just on these carpets now. I'm on these red carpets and I'm just like, yeah, I don't want to, I don't want to see this. But it's intimidating in a way that it forces you to make a decision. And no one, there's no better face for my brand than mine. And I had to make a decision inside of myself, wrestling with all of my insecurities and the imposter syndrome and the fear of what other people are going to think. I had to have that season so that I can break the thing that was trying to break me.
Mm.
And I recognize that if I didn't allow myself to come from behind the curtain, if you will, that it would have stunted the growth of the organization. Because people, they need to see that there is someone that's driving this bus. And when they don't see it, it causes questions as it pertains to support. It causes questions as it pertains to funders and partners. It causes questions to how people show up and support you. And once I started, getting out there and being vocal, like even just speaking publicly, oh my gosh, like that's a whole nother wrestling match. But I kept putting myself in these hard situations, forcing myself to do it because those were the very expectations that I had for my young people. And so I tasked myself with, okay, now I gotta hit this level. So the expectations that they'll hit this level, keep pushing myself up as they're striving to come up. But if they get out ahead of me, then that means I'm no longer leading them. And some of them are not always, it's not always best for them to not have a multitude of counselors and guides and things like that. So again, my challenge was, that's the expectation for my young people, then surely T, you have to beat this thing. And so again, events, awards, like I would win awards and not show up. I'm so embarrassed. Show up for them. But no, suit up for the game, Cookie. It's the Super Bowl. People want to see what you got.
Oh, I love that. I want to ask your opinion on something. One of the things I come across really often, and I think it is, and I'm talking in the corporate space right now, right? My opinion and a lot of feedback I hear is that it's really difficult for people to get feedback that they can do something with. Prove, if people don't get genuine, honest feedback, either people are kind of cheerleading them and, yeah, great job.
Yeah.
But not giving people what people need to grow in a really kind and respectful way, right? So
yeah.
I just love, I can imagine that you've built a place with a very strong, open, transparent feedback culture to get people to see. Like, tell us about that. What does that feel like to be part of that?
Well, we deal with kids and we deal with families that have experienced trauma. So one of the worst things we can do is pretend like we're not visible to them as they're visible to us. And vulnerability is super important because we have to build trust relationships before we can pull excellence out of them. So if they don't trust you, they will not work with you. And if they don't work with you, we can't help them. And so right out of the gate, listen, they know who I am. They know what I've been through. They know where I'm going. They know where we've been because I know those same things about them. So that whole open, this is real. There's no candy coat or sugar coat. If you're going to make it, it's because you fought to make it. But I'm going to give you all the tools, but I'm not doing the work for you. So I don't run a welfare system, but I will empower them to produce for themselves. And that comes with us just being very clear about how we're showing up in each other's lives. They know that Miss T I'm a force, but I want what's best for you. And it may feel like you're coming into boot camp, but I'm teaching you how to live.
Yeah.
And so if you want me to give you tools and techniques that's going to make you feel good, you're probably in the wrong place. You won't feel good until we win.
Yeah.
And this is the process to get you to winning. And again, just the conversation, like no one can have thin skin here. No one can be sensitive. And I find that we're dealing with the generations of young people that we're dealing with today, they're ultra sensitive. And I'm cut from a different cloth. You know, if you're going to make it, you got to take the hard. You got to take the hard because it's what gives you the mental toughness to survive the day that we're living in.
Mm-hmm.
And it works in reverse. Again, some of our most outstanding programs are from kids telling us what they don't like. Parents upset by what they experienced, and we adjust quickly. Like I'm not there. There is no part of our game. Again, kids are honest.
Yeah.
There's no part of our game where, everything is, lollipops and ice cream cones all the time. Sometimes we get families coming in here and they're living out of their cars, but they keep showing up because they know they can get resources with us. So I never pretend like I'm a perfect human. I'm flawed just like everybody else. But as long as we're working at this thing together, the goal is that we all win. So that dialogue, that honest dialogue, and the reality of where you're at versus where I'm at. Again, just this morning, I had my entire staff in my room. I said, listen, I'm not a crier, but I'm on the brink of it. I got a lot of pressure on my shoulders and I need everybody to show up and do their part. I don't have the potential to carry any dead weight. I'm driving a bus. So either you on the bus and we're going to the goal, or you got to get off on this next stop. That was a conversation I had just this morning with my staff. But the truth of the matter is, if we are all on this bus and we get to this destination, we all win. Now, if you're finding the pressure of the moment is too much for you, I love you. I will help you find another job, but you got to get off the bus because I can't carry you and carry me and carry all of this at the same time. That's honesty. And I find that people appreciate that. They appreciate the fact that it looks like I got it going on all the time. But no, sometimes I go home and eat freaking cheesecake and cuddle up with my blankie and try to figure out how in the heaven I'm going to show up tomorrow. It's not always perfect and fun, but if I can't be honest with the people that are in my core that I see every day, sometimes more than my own family, then there's something wrong with me and there's something wrong with what I've built.
Yeah, it's amazing, Miss T. And there's so many things in there about, your team are clear about what winning looks like. They know what that looks like. That's super important. And the other thing is, it reminds me of actually a reasonably senior leader, but had kind of moved into her first really big leadership role. And, the conversation she had with me was, I'm going to need to kind of put on my leadership persona now. And I'm like, what is that? What is that leadership persona? Like, just be you, because that's what people are going to respond to.
That's it.
Can I ask you, Miss T, what is, I ask all of our guests, what does brave feminine leadership mean to you?
I would answer that with it depends on the day and it depends on the season. Like, I think brave feminine leadership is, when you built something with your family and then you have to release your family from the assignment so that they can go live their own lives. I would say that, brave feminine leadership is when you have to do the work of 15 people because you can. And you have to fight to get paid what men get paid to do less. And you show up and you say, no, this is wrong. I think brave feminine leadership is being the voice of people who don't have the courage and the confidence to speak up for themselves. I think brave feminine leadership is never giving your power to people that do not understand what it takes for you to build yourself as a powerhouse. And there are people on this planet that will try to suck you dry because they don't want to put in the work. I think brave feminine leadership are the people who will rise to the occasion because somebody has to. And because they showed up, somebody's life is better. And whether it's a small thing like paying for somebody's groceries or a great thing like, some kid coming out of the juvenile hall and not having any place to go, and you provide that for them as a mama like one. I think brave feminine leadership are women that are not afraid to shift things, bend things, break things, and then make them better, and not let the critic or the people that have limited understanding and low expectations detour them from being great. And I think that we fall prey to that because of how we're made. But I don't subscribe to the idea that this is men's work or women's work. It's just work. And whoever can get the job done, may the best man or woman win. And I just make sure if I'm in the category with you, I'm gonna make it real hard for you. I'm my own competition.
Yeah.
I think you can't, there's no one word, one sentence definition of that. I think we all have that in us. And I think that if you allow it to be stoked, it causes your greatness, but it takes bravery. It takes bravery to do it. It takes bravery to do what you're doing. It takes bravery. And most people put that in their back pocket. And I wear that on my forehead all day, every day, because that's what it takes to win in a way that helps the multitudes succeed in life.
So no more waiting for permission.
No, my God, what are you waiting for? You're living, you're breathing, you can walk, you can talk. Like, what other kind of go for it do you need? Most people are waiting for permission to become. Like, you don't need anybody's permission to become. You're here. You're alive. You can blink. You can breathe. You have blood. Your heart's beating. Go for it. And that's, again, like, what do you, there's a hesitation that I don't understand in people. There's a hesitation in people that possess, the qualities of someone that has the potential to do something phenomenal, but they're waiting for someone to tell them they can. Mm-hmm. And, maybe that I wrestled with that insecurity, but, I'll be the one. I'll be the one to tell you right now, whatever that it thing is, it's going to keep coming up in you. And it's going to keep coming to your mind. It's going to keep tickling your brain. It's going to keep agitating your spirit until you do something with it. Go, take a step into it and go for it. There's no book for what I'm doing. There's no model for what I'm doing. I'm 10 years ahead of anybody in my industry and my craft. I'm pioneering something that most people still today do not understand, but they will in 10 years. I'll have a playbook for them. So for me to wait for someone to tell me to tear down walls, kick open doors, and hold those doors open for the generations that are coming after me, if I were to wait, there were so many people that would be in trouble. I can't wait, just like you can't wait. Just like it's going to keep presenting itself to you until you do something with the idea. Otherwise, the idea will go to somebody else and you won't be credited for transforming the world with your idea.
Miss T, you spoke earlier about a ripple. I mean, one hell of a ripple that you are creating, much more than a ripple. I mean, there's massive waves, but it's been an absolute privilege to have you join with me today. We must do it again soon.
I would love that. Thank you. Thank you very much.